The Third Reich collapsed in May 1945. Hitler was dead. Berlin was rubble. But thousands of Nazi officials simply melted into the chaos, changed their names, and started new lives. Among them were women who had worked for the Gestapo, interrogators, secretaries, informants, guards, women who had tortured prisoners, processed deportation lists, and signed death warrants. When the smoke cleared and the trials began, what happened to them? Did they face justice? Did they escape? The answers will shock you. Between 1933 and 1945, roughly 5,000 women worked directly for the Gestapo across occupied Europe. They weren't just typists, they were interrogators at Prince Albrecht Strasse in Berlin, block leaders in the women's section at Ravensbrück, deportation coordinators in Paris and Amsterdam, radio operators who tracked resistance cells across France, guards who beat prisoners unconscious in basement cells from Oslo to Athens. When Germany surrendered, most of these women simply walked away. If you value documented historical research like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Nuremberg trial records and declassified Allied intelligence files. Now back to the story. The Allies had lists, incomplete lists. By summer 1945, British and American intelligence officers were hunting down Nazi war criminals across the rubble of Germany. They had names, faces, last known addresses, but women were often overlooked. The assumption was simple. Women were victims, not perpetrators, housewives, not executioners. This assumption would prove catastrophic. Take Ilse Koch, wife of the Buchenwald commandant. She had prisoners whipped for sport. She ordered the murders of inmates whose tattooed skin she wanted for lampshades. American troops arrested her in June 1945. She stood trial, got life imprisonment, then suicide in her cell at Aichach prison in 1967. But Koch was famous, visible. Most Gestapo women were neither. Consider the case files from Ravensbrück. The camp had over 3,000 female guards and staff between 1939 and 1945. When Soviet troops liberated the camp in April 1945, they found mass graves with 20,000 bodies. The crematorium was still warm, but where were the guards? British intelligence teams found exactly 47 former Ravensbrück staff in the immediate aftermath, 47 out of 3,000. The rest had vanished. Herta Oberhäuser worked as a doctor at Ravensbrück. She performed medical experiments on Polish prisoners, injected gasoline into their leg muscles, deliberately infected wounds with bacteria and dirt, removed limbs without anesthesia. American investigators arrested her in 1946. She stood trial at Nuremberg, got 20 years, then walked free in 1952. Good behavior. She opened a family practice in West Germany and treated children for 15 years before anyone recognized her name. The numbers tell the story. Allied war crimes. Investigators processed over 3 million denazification cases between 1945 and 1950. Of those, fewer than 15,000 involved women. The assumption that women were passive bystanders created a massive blind spot. Thousands of female Gestapo officers, camp guards, Chiefstalls, and SS personnel simply resumed normal lives under their real names or with forged documents. Maria Mandl ran the women's section at Auschwitz-Birkenau. She selected prisoners for the gas chambers. She beat women to death with her bare hands. She orchestrated the murder of over 500,000 people. British forces captured her in Austria in August 1945. She stood trial in Krakow in 1947, got the death penalty, then execution by hanging in January 1948. But Mandl was caught by accident during a routine checkpoint search. For every Maria Mandl who faced justice, dozens escaped. Emma Zimmer worked as a guard at Ravensbrück and Lichtenberg. She supervised the murder of thousands of prisoners. When the camps were liberated, she disappeared into Bavaria. Allied investigators never found her. She lived under her real name until her natural death in 1994. No charges, no trial, no consequences. The Gestapo's administrative network relied heavily on women. They processed deportation orders, maintained prisoner records, coordinated with local police forces, and managed communication between headquarters and field offices. After the war, these women possessed detailed knowledge of Nazi operations. Some became valuable intelligence assets for the Allies. Others sold their silence to the highest bidder. Juana Bormann worked as a guard at Ravensbrück, Auschwitz, and Bergen-Belsen. Prisoners called her the woman with the dogs because she used trained German shepherds to attack inmates. British forces arrested her at Bergen-Belsen in April 1945. She stood trial with other camp staff, got the death penalty, then execution by hanging in December 1945. The rope broke twice. Guards had to repeat the procedure 3 times before she died. But for every Bormann who faced execution, hundreds melted into civilian populations. They married returning Wehrmacht soldiers. They changed cities. They destroyed documents and photographs. They coached their children never to ask about the war years. By 1950, most traces had vanished. The Cold War changed everything. By 1948, the Western Allies needed Germany as a bulwark against Soviet expansion. Denazification programs wound down. War crimes, prosecutions slowed to a crawl. Former Gestapo personnel found themselves valuable assets rather than wanted criminals. Both sides recruited extensively from Nazi intelligence networks. Hildegard Neumann worked as a Gestapo interrogator in Berlin and Vienna. She specialized in breaking resistance members through psychological torture. American intelligence officers recruited her in 1948 as an expert on Soviet methods. She worked for the CIA until 1962, then retired to California on a government pension. Her wartime activities remained classified until 1999. The Vatican rat lines helped thousands of Nazi war criminals escape to South America. While most attention focused on high-profile male fugitives like Adolf Eichmann and Josef Mengele, women used the same networks. They traveled with false papers through Rome and Genoa to Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. Conservative estimates suggest over 200 female Gestapo personnel escaped via church networks. Hermine Braunsteiner worked as a guard at Ravensbrück and Majdanek. She stomped prisoners to death with her steel-toed boots. Inmates called her the Mare because she kicked like a horse. After the war, she married an American soldier and moved to Queens, New York. She lived as a housewife for 25 years before war crimes investigators tracked her down in 1971. The United States extradited her to West Germany in 1973. She stood trial for the murder of children at Majdanek, got life imprisonment, then death in prison in 1999. But Braunsteiner's case was exceptional. Most female Gestapo personnel were never identified, never prosecuted, never extradited. They raised families, worked normal jobs, and died natural deaths. Their crimes remained hidden for decades. The East German Stasi recruited extensively from former Gestapo ranks. Women who had worked as informants and interrogators found new careers in communist intelligence services. Their experience with surveillance techniques, psychological manipulation, and torture methods made them valuable assets. Files opened after German reunification revealed hundreds of former Nazi women in senior Stasi positions. Elfriede Schultz worked as a Gestapo secretary in Hamburg from 1939 to 1945. She processed deportation lists for Jewish families. Her signature appeared on thousands of arrest warrants. After the war, she joined the East German Ministry of State Security. She rose to department head level before retiring in 1978. Her Nazi background remained hidden until archivists cross-referenced personnel files in 1993. The scale of female participation in Nazi atrocities remained hidden for generations. Court records focused on male commanders and administrators. Testimony from survivors often emphasized male perpetrators. The image of women as victims rather than participants became entrenched in popular memory and academic scholarship. Recent research has revealed the depth of female involvement. University archives in Berlin and Munich contain personnel files for over 12,000 women who worked directly for SS and Gestapo organizations. These were not passive clerks or reluctant participants. They were active collaborators who sought employment with Nazi security services, applied for promotions, and volunteered for overseas assignments. Erna Wallisch worked as a radio operator for the Gestapo in Prague. She intercepted resistance communications and coordinated with Wehrmacht units during anti-partisan operations. Her intercepts led to the arrest and execution of over 300 Czech resistance fighters. After the war, she escaped to Austria with false papers. She worked as a telephone operator in Vienna until her natural death in 1987. Czech authorities never located her. The children and grandchildren of female Gestapo personnel often discovered family secrets decades later. Hidden photographs, concealed documents, and deathbed confessions revealed participation in mass murder. Some pursued justice through legal channels. Others chose silence to protect family reputations. In 1979, construction workers renovating a house in Hamburg found a trunk in the basement containing Gestapo uniforms, photographs from concentration camps, and execution orders signed by a woman named Anna Müller. The house had belonged to Müller's daughter, who had died the previous year without revealing her mother's wartime activities. Police investigations revealed that Müller had worked as an execution coordinator at 4 different concentration camps. She had ordered the deaths of over 8,000 prisoners. She had died peacefully in bed in 1968, 30 years after her last murder. The final accounting remains incomplete. Allied records suggest approximately 5,000 women worked directly for Gestapo operations between 1933 and 1945. Of those, fewer than 300 ever faced trial for war crimes. Fewer than 50 received death sentences. Most lived full lives under their real names in Germany, Austria, and the United States. Their victims numbered in the hundreds of thousands. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came in 1997, when German archivists opened the personnel files of the Bavarian State Police. Cross-referencing wartime records revealed that over 400 former female Gestapo personnel had been quietly rehired as civil servants in the post-war period. They had processed citizenship applications, managed government offices, and taught in public schools. Some had risen to senior positions in state government. Their backgrounds had been deliberately concealed by sympathetic administrators, who viewed them as victims of circumstance rather than war criminals. The networks that protected female Gestapo personnel extended deep into post-war society. Church leaders, business owners, and government officials actively concealed identities and provided new documentation. The Red Cross issued thousands of travel documents without proper background checks. Swiss banks accepted deposits from women carrying suitcases full of gold teeth and wedding rings stolen from concentration camp victims. Irma Grace worked as a guard at Ravensbrück, Auschwitz, and Bergen-Belsen. She was 22 years old when British forces captured her in April 1945. Prisoners testified that she carried a whip and pistol, selecting inmates for medical experiments in gas chambers. She beat women unconscious with her bare hands. She trained dogs to attack prisoners on command. British military court sentenced her to death in November 1945. She was executed by hanging at Hamelin Prison in December 1945. She was 22 years old, but Grace was caught at liberation. Most guards had weeks or months to disappear. The Argentina connection ran deeper than most historians acknowledge. Between 1946 and 1955, over 1,500 German women entered Argentina on Vatican-issued travel documents. Immigration records in Buenos Aires show suspicious patterns, groups of women arriving on the same ships, listing identical sponsors, claiming identical professions. Argentine intelligence files, opened in 2003, Haas, revealed that many held senior positions in Nazi security services. Brunhilde Pomsel worked as Joseph Goebbels' personal secretary from 1942 to 1945. She typed propaganda orders, deportation lists, and execution authorizations. Her signature appeared on documents that led to the deaths of thousands of Jews, Roma, Stas, and political prisoners. Soviet forces captured her in Berlin bunker in May 1945. She spent 5 years in Soviet prison camps, then returned to West Germany in 1950. She worked as a secretary for Bavarian Radio until retirement in 1971. She lived until 2017, dying at age 106. She gave her first interview about the war in 2016. Quote, "I was just doing my job." The psychological profiles revealed disturbing patterns. Allied interrogators documented that female Gestapo personnel showed higher rates of voluntary participation than male colleagues. They sought promotions, requested transfers to more active units, and volunteered for overseas assignments in occupied territories. Court psychiatrists noted absence of remorse, tendency to minimize actions, and persistent belief in Nazi racial ideology even after defeat. Dorothea Binz worked as chief guard at Ravensbrück from 1940 to 1945. She supervised the execution of over 10,000 prisoners. She personally selected women and children for gas chambers. She beat inmates to death with clubs and whips. British forces captured her hiding in a farm outside Hamburg in May 1945. She stood trial with other Ravensbrück staff, received death sentence, then execution by hanging in May 1947. She was 26 years old. The Nuremberg trials prosecuted only the most visible cases. Secondary trials across occupied zones handled middle-level personnel, but the majority of female Gestapo staff never faced charges. Allied investigators prioritized male commanders and administrators, limited resources, competing Cold War priorities, and assumptions about female participation created massive gaps in prosecution. Some women attempted to profit from their wartime activities. They sold information about hidden Nazi assets, revealed locations of buried treasure, and blackmailed former colleagues who had achieved post-war success. American intelligence files contain dozens of reports about female informants offering details about concentration camp gold deposits, Swiss bank accounts, and art collections, in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Margot Dreschel worked as a guard at Ravensbrück and Bergen-Belsen. She used trained dogs to attack prisoners during roll call. She forced women to stand naked in freezing temperatures for hours. She supervised medical experiments on Polish political prisoners. British forces arrested her at Bergen-Belsen in April 1945. She stood trial with other camp staff, received death sentence, then execution by hanging in December 1945. The executioner needed 3 attempts. The rope broke twice. The false identity networks operated with sophisticated coordination. Former SS officers established document mills in Munich, Hamburg, Aix, and Vienna. They produced birth certificates, marriage licenses, and employment records that could withstand casual inspection. Catholic monasteries provided safe houses and new identities. Ratline coordinators specialized in female fugitives, understanding that women attracted less suspicion during border crossings. Elisabeth Volkenrath served as head guard at Auschwitz-Birkenau and Bergen-Belsen. She supervised the murder of hundreds of thousands of prisoners. She personally operated gas chamber doors and selected victims for execution. She trained new guards in torture techniques and prisoner management. British forces captured her at Bergen-Belsen in April 1945. She stood trial with other camp personnel, received death sentence, then execution by hanging in December 1945. She was 26 years old. The American recruitment programs remain controversial. Operation Paperclip brought Nazi scientists to the United States. Lesser-known programs recruited intelligence personnel, including women with expertise in surveillance, interrogation, and psychological warfare. CIA files released in the 1990s revealed over 300 former female Gestapo personnel on government payrolls between 1948 and 1975. Medical experiments conducted by female doctors and nurses at concentration camps were particularly brutal. They sterilized women without anesthesia, injected prisoners with diseases, and performed surgical procedures on living subjects. After the war, many resumed medical practice under assumed names. Medical licensing boards rarely conducted background checks on refugee physicians claiming to have lost credentials during wartime. Herta Botho worked as a guard at Ravensbrück, Auschwitz, and Bergen-Belsen. She beat prisoners with rubber truncheons and wooden clubs. She forced women to stand in mud puddles during winter roll calls. She selected victims for medical experiments and gas chambers. British forces captured her at Bergen-Belsen in April 1945. She received a 10-year prison sentence, then early release in December 1951. She married, changed her name, and worked as a seamstress in northern Germany until her death in 2008. The Soviet recruitment of former Nazi personnel matched Western efforts. The Stasi employed hundreds of women with Gestapo backgrounds. Their experience with surveillance techniques, informant networks, Tauschcard, and psychological manipulation made them valuable assets in Cold War intelligence operations. Files opened after German reunification revealed extensive collaboration between former enemies. Children of female Gestapo personnel often discovered family secrets through accidental discoveries. Hidden photographs, concealed documents, and conversations overheard during family gatherings revealed participation in mass murder. Some pursued historical research to understand family involvement. Others maintained silence to protect relatives and preserve family reputation. The last confirmed female Gestapo war criminal died in 2018. She was 96 years old, living in a nursing home in Munich under her maiden name. She had never been charged, never been tried, never faced consequences for her role in processing deportation orders that sent 12,000 Jewish children to their deaths at Auschwitz. Her identity was revealed only after her death, when nursing home staff found wartime documents hidden in her personal effects. Justice delayed had become justice denied. The dead cannot stand trial.